I started this video in the middle of last week, but I was unable to finish and upload it. I was very busy and I wasn't here, and now you're getting to watch this video today. But I returned to the internet world and discovered that there were a few developments that happened over the weekend that are worth discussing. So, first and foremost, I came back, found out that Mark Hamill had been awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Congratulations, Mark. And secondly, I found out that Jon Favreau was directing a live-action Star Wars series, and there is news that I may talk about in a later video about that. Also, in other news, even though I don't watch the Rebels TV show, I have been made aware that Grand Admiral Thrawn was defeated by superpowered space whales. And lastly, Daisy Ridley is unable to justify and give agency to Rey as a legitimate working character in a fictional franchise, and that's what I'm going to focus on in this particular video. So to start this thing off, I'm sure you all know that there are creative people out there who do not use Mary Sue characters. In fact, I would go so far as to say that some of them use characters in order to make a commentary on the Mary Sue character and the problems with such characters. George R.R. Martin is one of my favorite writers, and I believe that he is one such creative person who has used certain characters in order to make a commentary on Mary Sue's in general. So I'll explain what I mean by all of this. But first I want to define Mary Sue. According to Wikipedia, a Mary Sue is an idealized and seemingly perfect fictional character. Often this character is recognized as an author insert or wish fulfillment. They can usually perform better at tasks than should be possible, given the amount of training or experience. So I doubt there will be very many people in my audience who will disagree with the assertion that Rey is, in fact, a Mary Sue. But whether by design or by accident, George R.R. Martin seems to have created a character that is, in a way, a commentary on Mary Sue characters. And by this I mean that the character is not a Mary Sue, but in the story, the characters that surround this person treat him as if he is a Mary Sue. In other words, they treat him as though he is the greatest, as if he deserves everything and he is good at everything, when in reality he's not. What's interesting is that the consequences that this character suffers because of this treatment is very much like what Disney, Lucasfilm, and Star Wars is suffering now because of the way they decided to force a character like Rey upon Star Wars fans. Things are turning out less than ideal for them. So in this video I'm going to bring up a number of characters that will probably be unfamiliar to many of you. So I will have these visual aids that will hopefully help everyone remember who is who and why they are relevant as I break this whole thing down. So, just as a spoiler warning, if any of you ever intend to read The Hedge Knight, The Sworn Sword, or The Mystery Knight, I would suggest turning this video off now and maybe reading those books sometime soon and then coming back to listen to this commentary, because there will be spoilers. So, we've already established what a Mary Sue is, and the character in question is Daemon Blackfyre II. To understand why characters in the book were treating Daemon Blackfyre II as a Mary Sue, you have to understand a few key details in the history of the Targaryen dynasty. Nearly 200 years before Daemon, his ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, and his two sisters used dragons to take over the 7 kingdoms of Westeros and bind them into one large kingdom. This began the Targaryen dynasty. Several generations later, his descendant, Aegon IV, known as Aegon the Unworthy, took the throne. Aegon the Unworthy was a disgusting blob of a king. He took many wives, he took many more concubines, he had many children, many of which were deemed bastards for as long as Aegon the Unworthy was alive. Before his death, Aegon the Unworthy legitimized every single last one of his bastards. This caused chaos in the realm for hundreds of years, and many rebellions took place because of it. These wars were commonly known as the Blackfyre Rebellions. Now that word Blackfyre is going to continually pop up. Remember, we are discussing Daemon Blackfyre II. The Targaryen kings who ended up succeeding Aegon the Unworthy to the throne ended up calling all of his bastards and their descendants Blackfyres. So as we enter our story, Aegon V is traveling to Winterfell with Sir Duncan the Tall. Someday Aegon V will be king, but for now he's just a young boy, and he is squiring for Duncan the Tall, a hedge knight. A hedge knight is basically a knight who has not sworn allegiance to a lord. Usually they're pretty poor. Duncan never received a formal education, and he's really quite ignorant of how the world actually works. Fortunately, young Aegon has had the best of educations, and he's very intelligent. I've gone through the trouble of explaining these two characters because they are bystanders to everything I'm going to be discussing in this video. The story of Daemon Blackfyre II is told through their eyes. On their way north, they come across a caravan, and they are subsequently invited to a tournament. Now, at these types of tournaments, there's all kinds of things going on, but the feature is generally the jousting, and prizes are customarily given to the winner of the jousting tournament. Now, almost immediately upon getting invited to this tournament, Aegon is very nervous, or wary, I should say, about accepting the invitation. But as I stated earlier, Duncan is often unaware of the dynamics that run the world that he lives in, and especially political dynamics. So the both of them end up accepting the invitation. And this is where they meet Daemon Blackfyre. Now, Daemon is traveling under an assumed name and a disguise. He's dyed his hair a different color, and he's going under the name John the Fiddler. I guess this would be a good time to point out that Targaryens have very distinctive features in most cases. They have silver hair and violet eyes. They're generally very easy to pick out in a crowd, but there aren't very many of them. Fortunately for Daemon Blackfyre, according to George R.R. Martin, hair dye works better in Westeros than it does in our modern-day world. You'll notice the picture of Aegon that I've been putting up frequently in this video. Aegon is bald. That's because when he went out into the world with Duncan, he shaved his silver hair off, so no one would know who he was. And he could experience life as a commoner would, and of course it's also protection from his political enemies. But also when people aren't expecting to find purple or violet-colored eyes in someone, they often end up mistaking the purple and violet eyes that someone has for some other color, like dark black or blue or something like that. So in this story, both Daemon and Aegon are both effectively incognito Targaryen descendants. So once Aegon, Daemon, and Duncan all get to the tourney grounds, and they meet many of the different knights that will participate in the jousting. One of these knights stands out. His name is Sir Glendon Ball. He's supposedly the son of a well-known and respected knight who fought and died for Daemon Blackfyre's father in one of the earlier Blackfyre rebellions. But Sir Glendon is a young man, and most of the knights there consider him the son of a prostitute. Now, the winner of the tournament will be awarded with a dragon egg that will be presented by the lord who is hosting the tournament. And Sir Glendon Ball is dead set on gaining the glory and the notoriety that comes along with winning the tournament. But to make a long story short, it turns out that the entire thing is a ruse. Almost all of those in attendance, whether they're participating in the joust or not, are Blackfyre loyalists. And it turns out that all of the knights involved were there for the specific reason of losing to John the Fiddler, a.k.a. Daemon Blackfyre II. Daemon Blackfyre would not only gain glory automatically, but he would also be presented with a very rare dragon egg. And a dragon egg in the hands of a Targaryen or a Blackfyre is a very important symbol to the people of Westeros. The only problem is that Daemon Blackfyre is not a warrior. He looks the part. He even believes he's a leader and a warrior. But he does not possess the qualities it takes to convince men to want to die for him. And there are 3 people at this tournament that seem unaware of all of this. Sir Duncan the Tall, Aegon V, and Sir Glendon Ball. But even Daemon Blackfyre believes that he is winning the tournament with every night that he unhorses. And the only difference between him, Duncan, Glendon, and Aegon is that he knows that he's actually Daemon Blackfyre II. So in the course of all this, 2 things happen. Aegon goes missing, and Glendon Ball makes clear that he is there to win that dragon egg. So it's not clear what happened to Aegon, but Glendon Ball has to be dealt with. And a scheme to frame him for trying to steal the dragon egg is put into motion. So once this scheme plays out, Glendon Ball is captured and tortured, and Duncan finds Aegon revealing himself to the host lord who is putting on this entire thing. But none of this stops the tournament from going forward, so eventually Glendon Ball is released. And he's a mess. He's been tortured and everything, but he does get his chance to joust against Daemon Blackfyre II. And by this time, Daemon Blackfyre has washed out all the dye from his hair, and he is revealed himself as a Blackfyre. And all he needs to do is unseat Sir Glendon Ball, who is currently a bloody mess. And since you're not currently reading the book, I will not leave you in suspense. Sir Glendon Ball unseats Daemon Blackfyre II. And as this happens, a group of armed men surrounds the tourney grounds, and all in attendance. At this point, the Daemon Blackfire II stands up out of the mud and tries to rally his men to battle the forces of the Targaryen king. And, well, needless to say, it doesn't work, but he does give it a valiant effort. And I guess the point of all this is just to acknowledge that what we're seeing with Star Wars and Rey, we're getting like a look at this exact same scenario happening in slow motion almost. I mean, Rey was so clearly supposed to be the next Luke Skywalker. In fact, she was supposed to be way better than Luke Skywalker. You can tell by the way they portray this character. Consider all the knights that took the fall for Daemon Blackfire II, and then consider the characters that have taken the fall on purpose for Rey. First there was Han Solo, kamikazed himself for no reason. Then there was Luke Skywalker, kamikazed himself for no reason. And then think of the directors who have kamikazed their careers, like J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, and then think of the directors that have been fired for not wanting to do what Kathleen Kennedy wanted them to do. These men would not kamikaze themselves for stupid storytelling, for stupid characters, for just stupidness. I was discussing Rey with someone recently, and they were, after The Force Awakens came out, they were really enmeshed in the debate between the Finn Rey fans versus the Reylo fans. Now, I never really took part in that debate. In fact, after The Force Awakens, I didn't discuss Star Wars online at all, really. I didn't go to any of the internet forums or Tumblr or any, or Twitter to talk about it. But what this guy was telling me was that a large portion of the Reylo population comes from Tumblr. Tumblr is also a site I just do not understand. I tried going there once or twice, and it's chaos to me, so I don't bother with that place. So I don't know what it's like, but I do know that it's known for congregations of SJWs. Anyway, what my friend was telling me was that for these groups of people, developing a character isn't so much about manifesting flaws in any sort of visible physical way, so that the character's story could be about eventually overcoming those flaws. In other words, despite the fact that Rey fools around with a lightsaber regularly, she'll never be maimed physically in a fight with a lightsaber. Rather, she'll experience a different sort of challenge. She'll have a friend who is clearly completely devoted to her, and then she'll have this abusive, darker, brooding character that she's drawn to. And instead of going with the more healthy relationship, she will reject the devoted character and try and save and turn the abuser. And that will be the ultimate challenge for this character that is supposed to take the place of Luke Skywalker and exceed him. The challenge is all about touchy-feely, mushy-mush stuff. The type of stuff you'll get from watching or reading Twilight, where Bella Swan is tossing and turning and having nightmares in bed at night because her boyfriend has left her, even though she has this perfectly eligible guy who is devoted to her across the street, as if she was the last woman on Earth or something. So with all that in mind, I want to read you a small part of an article entitled Star Wars star Daisy Ridley says that Rey has no weaknesses. But Daisy Ridley, who plays Rey, isn't doing her character any favors by essentially saying that Rey has no weaknesses. Via comicbook.com, Ridley had a special Facebook Live event where she goes into some detail about her world view and how she doesn't really view weaknesses in people as actual weaknesses at all. I don't really believe in weaknesses in people, Ridley said, because I think you can't decide what's good and what's bad in a person because everything makes the whole, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, as we know. I for sure think people can work on themselves with things like anger and jealousy, maybe things like that, but that's workable. That's not something that's fixed that can't be changed. You can work on that. And I don't think she's those things. Things you have to work on are weaknesses, irregardless of what Daisy Ridley's personal opinion of what the definition of a weakness is. If your character's part of an action-adventure fiction, then things your character needs to work on is something that the villain should be taking advantage of. In a Star Wars fiction, if your character doesn't need to work on their piloting or their combat skills, it's called Star Wars. That character has no weaknesses that the villain can exploit. At that point, it's just like George Lucas said. Superman doesn't work without kryptonite. He's overpowered. He needs kryptonite to work. A Superman who is only challenged by touchy-feely, mushy-mush emotions type stuff does not work. By the same token, a Jedi who has no physical challenges is cow dung. When someone pointed out that maybe Rey's obsession with her parents might be considered a weakness, she once again disagreed. I don't think that is a weakness. Great question, but I don't think that is a weakness, Ridley noted. I'm not going to finish this, but like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will leave a link to this article in the description box below. As always, if you're listening, You are the new rebellion. You are the new rebellion.